There is something the INFJ rarely admits to themselves. Not that they are rare, not that they are misunderstood. They know those things. What they rarely admit is this: they are not the same person they were 5 years ago, not the same archetype, not running the same pattern. Something shifted, and most of them cannot name it. Every tradition that ever studied the human soul understood this. The Celts called them thresholds, the Greeks called them initiations, the alchemists called them stages of the work. Different cultures, different language, but the same recognition that a person does not stay fixed in one mode of being. You move, you cross, you transform. And when you cross a genuine threshold, the archetype you were living before is no longer the one you are living now. The pattern changes, the gifts change, the shadow changes. Most INFJ content will not tell you this. It will hand you a personality profile and invite you to live inside it forever. But that is not self-knowledge. That is a cage built out of accurate information. Real self-knowledge asks, which archetype are you living right now? Not which one you were, not which one you aspire to. Now, what I want to map out today is the 7 INFJ archetypes as a dynamic system, not a fixed hierarchy of worth, but a living classification in which your position shifts every time you cross a genuine threshold. Think of it as a psychological map. You are always somewhere on it. The question is whether you know where, and whether you understand what moving to the next position actually requires. 7 archetypes, each with its own gifts, each with its own shadow, each defined not just by what it does, but by what threshold it is standing at. And at the end of this, you will know. Not the archetype you wish you were living, the one you are actually living right now. We begin here, not because it is the lowest, but because it is where most authentic INFJ development starts. The exile is the archetype born from the first great wound, the recognition that you do not belong where you were placed, the family that could not hold your depth, the culture that calls your sensitivity a flaw, the early years of translating yourself into a language that was never yours. The exile is not weak. That is the first thing to understand. The exile is precise. It knows with a quality of knowing that cannot be argued away that something is wrong with the arrangement, that the world it was handed does not match the world it can sense exists. The shadow expression of the exile is withdrawal without movement. When this archetype is unintegrated, the knowing becomes a wound that justifies stillness. The exile begins to mistake isolation for wisdom and bitterness for discernment. It knows it does not belong, but it has not yet moved toward where it does. You are living the exile archetype right now if you carry a profound sense of differentness that has not yet found expression. If you know what you are not, but cannot yet say with clarity what you are. If your gifts feel real but unreachable. If you are waiting, not resting, but waiting for a world that has not yet arrived. The threshold out of the exile is not rescue. It is the decision to stop waiting for the world to recognize you and begin moving toward what you already know. Once the exile begins to move, the seeker emerges. The seeker is the archetype of directed hunger. This is the INFJ who has survived the initial wound of not belonging and has turned that survival into a search. Philosophy, mythology, psychology, spiritual traditions, ancient texts. The seeker devours them, not for academic accomplishment, but because every piece of genuine knowledge feels like a fragment of a map they have always been trying to read. The seeker's gift is synthesis. This archetype connects things that most minds cannot connect. It sees the thread between the alchemist and the Jungian psychologist and the Stoic philosopher and the depth of a single myth. It does not collect knowledge, it integrates it. The shadow expression is perpetual seeking without arrival. A seeker, unintegrated, becomes addicted to the search itself. It mistakes motion for progress. It reads the next book, watches the next video, finds the next framework, and never settles into the authority that comes from knowing enough to teach. It keeps moving because stillness feels like surrender. You are living the seeker archetype right now if you are in a period of rapid, hungry accumulation, reading widely, questioning everything, feeling close to something you cannot yet name. If your conversations always end with, "But what does it all mean?" If you feel the edges of your own understanding pressing outward, but have not yet crossed into the act of creation. The threshold out of the seeker is the moment you stop seeking permission to become an authority and simply begin speaking from what you know. This is the archetype that almost every ENFJ passes through, and it is the one most likely to be misread as a destination rather than a stage. The wounded healer carries its wound openly, not as weakness, as credential. This archetype has survived something real: grief, betrayal, illness, loss, the long dark years of not being understood. And it has done something remarkable with that survival. It has turned it into a capacity to hold the pain of others without flinching. The gift of the wounded healer is the rarest kind of empathy, not the soft, sympathetic empathy of someone who imagines what you feel, but the deep, knowing empathy of someone who has already stood where you are standing and found the way forward. The shadow expression is the wound becoming the identity. When this archetype is unintegrated, the healing capacity depends on remaining wounded. It cannot let the old pain resolve because the pain is the source of its value. It helps endlessly but never completes its own recovery. It is generous to others and brutal to itself. It gives from a well that it has never refilled. You are living the wounded healer right now if your work or your relationships are primarily organized around the needs of others. If people come to you in crisis and you rise to meet them with extraordinary capability, and then fall flat when asked to meet your own needs with the same care. If you are more fluent in other people's suffering than in your own quiet desires. The threshold out of the wounded healer is not the end of the healing gift. It is the integration of the wound, the moment you can say, "This happened, it shaped me, and it is no longer the only story I know how to tell." Not the hermit of isolation, the hermit of chosen solitude in service of something larger. Every major tradition had a version of this archetype. The desert fathers, the wandering monks, the philosophers who retreated from the city to think without interruption. They were not afraid of the world. They had chosen to stand apart from it so they could see it clearly. The gift of the hermit is perspective so deep it becomes prophetic. This archetype has withdrawn not from fear but from discipline. It knows that the noise of constant engagement destroys the quality of thought it is built to produce. It chooses depth over presence. It is willing to be misread as antisocial because it knows the work requires distance. The shadow expression is the hermit mistaking its withdrawal for superiority. When this archetype is unintegrated, the solitude becomes self-righteousness. It judges the world it has stepped away from, protects its own clarity so carefully that it never risks it in genuine contact. It watches but does not act. It understands but does not speak. You are living the hermit archetype right now if you are in a period of deliberate quietening, if you are producing work in silence that you have not yet shared, if you feel a deep need to protect your inner world from intrusion, if the people around you sense your distance, and you are neither troubled by that nor apologizing for it. The threshold out of the hermit is not a return to noise. It is the decision to let the clarity you have gathered be used, to bring the knowing back from the mountain and place it in front of the people it was always meant to reach. This is the archetype of dangerous capability. The Shapeshifter has developed such a sophisticated understanding of how human beings work that it can move through almost any social environment without friction. It adapts, it mirrors, it finds the register of any room and speaks in it fluently. It is not performing. It has simply become extraordinary at reading what a situation requires and providing it. The gift is influence. The shapeshifter can move people, shift rooms, and close distances between opposing sides. When this archetype is integrated, it uses its capability in service of something true. It is the INFJ who can walk into a negotiation, a boardroom, a deeply difficult conversation, and shift the outcome by sheer quality of presence and precision of language. The shadow expression is the loss of self. When the shapeshifter is not integrated, it begins to forget which voice is its own. It has played so many registers that the original key is hard to find. It is extraordinarily effective at meeting the needs of the room and quietly desperate in the moments when no one is watching. It gives people what they need and cannot remember what it needs. You are living the shapeshifter right now if you are highly effective in public and quietly lost in private. If people experience you as unusually capable, but you feel like an imposter who has simply not yet been caught. If your adaptability is serving your work but costing you something in your relationship with yourself. The threshold out of the shapeshifter is the decision to stop performing mastery and start building it. To let your natural voice be the dominant voice, even when the room would prefer a different one. This is the archetype most INFJs aspire to, and the one most rarely integrated. The seer is not a psychic. It is not mystical in the performative sense. The seer is the INFJ who has crossed enough thresholds that its pattern recognition has become genuinely prophetic, not because it sees the future, but because it understands the present so deeply that what is coming next is simply the logical consequence of what already exists. The gift is the ability to name what is not yet named, to say the thing the room is not saying, to see where a person, a relationship, an organization, or a culture is heading, and to say it clearly enough that it cannot be unfelt. The shadow expression is the burden without the boundary. The seer unintegrated sees too much and carries too much of what it sees. It knows what is coming for the people around it and cannot always stop them from walking into it. It absorbs the weight of its own perception. Exhausts itself seeing and bears the loneliness of being believed too late. You are living the seer right now if your insight has outpaced your ability to communicate it without being dismissed. If you are regularly right about things before others can see them. If the loneliness you carry is not the loneliness of not belonging, but the loneliness of seeing clearly in a world that prefers not to. The threshold for the seer is not to see less. It is to find the forms, the writing, the speaking, and the teaching that can hold what it sees and carry it into the world without destroying the one who carries it. And here, the rarest expression. The guardian of thresholds is the INFJ who has crossed enough of its own thresholds to become the threshold for others. It does not push people forward. It holds the edge between what they were and what they are becoming, making that crossing survivable. This is not a teacher in the ordinary sense. Teachers transfer knowledge. The guardian holds space for transformation. It knows, from its own repeated crossings, exactly what it costs to change at a fundamental level, and it does not minimize that cost. It does not offer comfort as a substitute for change. It offers presence in the fire. The gift is the rarest kind of authority, the kind earned by crossing, not by study. The guardian has been the exile, the seeker, the wounded healer. It has moved through each stage and integrated what each one had to teach. It does not stand above the hierarchy. It has walked its full length. The shadow expression is the guardian becoming the gatekeeper. When this archetype is unintegrated, it begins to control the crossing rather than hold it. It decides who is ready. It judges. It mistakes its own journey for the only valid journey. It becomes the obstacle instead of the threshold. You are living the role of the guardian of thresholds right now if people come to you not for answers but for permission to become themselves. If you are regularly present at the moments in people's lives when something is ending and something else is trying to begin. If your deepest satisfaction comes not from what you produce, but from who is changed by having been near you. Here is what this mapping reveals that most INFJ content will not tell you. You do not choose your current archetype. You inhabit it. And you cannot move to the next stage by studying it, by wishing for it, or by deciding you prefer it. You cross a threshold only when the current stage has been fully lived, when its gifts have been genuinely expressed and its shadow honestly faced. The exile cannot become the seer by skipping the seeker, the wounded healer, or the hermit. The stages are not arbitrary. They are the sequence of a particular kind of becoming. What you can choose is this, whether you live your current archetype consciously or unconsciously. Whether you name the shadow and work with it or deny it and let it run you. The INFJ who knows they are living the wounded healer right now and can say so clearly is already moving toward the threshold. The one who insists they are a seer but cannot show you the crossings they have made to get there is still standing at an earlier door. The classification is not a judgment, it is a map. And maps exist, so you know exactly where to go next. Take a moment with this, not to decide which archetype sounds most impressive, not to choose the one you most wish you were, but to sit with the honest question, which one is actually running your life right now? Which pattern are you expressing? Which shadow are you wrestling? Which threshold are you standing at and have been standing at if you are honest for longer than you meant to? The answer is not a verdict, it is a location. And once you know your location, the next move becomes visible. Every tradition that ever mapped the human soul understood that you cannot force the next stage of your becoming, but you can stop resisting it. You can stop pretending you are further along than you are, or further back than you have already come. You are somewhere on this map, and somewhere on this map is exactly the right place to be right now, not because the stage is comfortable, but because it is true. If you want to go deeper into identifying exactly where you are in this framework, the 7 INFJ Archetypes assessment is linked below. It was built for this precise kind of self-location. The next video explores the wounded healer in full, the archetype most INFJs spend the longest time inside, and the one most likely to be mistaken for a final destination rather than a crossing. If this video raised questions about your own pattern, that one will answer them. Until next time, find your power, know your myth,